Do you know what questions they're asking, since nobody kind of prepped me on that?
Today is the day we will learn more about the man arrested in the Delphi murders. Abby Williams and Libby German were killed more than 5.5 years ago. In just minutes, Indiana State Police will let us know why 50-year-old Richard Allen has been arrested in connection to this case.
Well, since this news first broke, we've been calling and reaching out to Carroll County Sheriff's Department since we learned of this arrest on Friday, but yet they told 13 News that nothing would be released until that press conference that's scheduled for just minutes today.
We have multiple crews at today's news conference, including Emily Longnecker, who has been on this story since Libby and Abby were first reported missing in February of 2017. Emily, I know it's got to be a bittersweet day there for family members.
It really is, ladies. You know, this is where it all comes full circle here at the Delphi United Methodist Church. This is the same church where Indiana State Police brought reporters more than 5 years ago to announce that those two missing teens, Abby Williams and Libby German, had been found. Their bodies had been found in the woods just outside of Delphi, and that they had been murdered. And now today, Indiana State Police bringing us back to this same room to announce that there has been an arrest in the case. Sources tell us that arrest is 50-year-old Richard M. Allen. It can't be overstated how long the families and the community here in Delphi have waited for an announcement. You see all of the media here. We see several members of the community here that have gathered in this church, all of them waiting for answers and to hear what state police are going to say. You know, the girls' murders, Abby and Libby's murders, it really changed these two families' lives forever. It really changed this community forever. Delphi is a sleepy bedroom community here in Carroll County, and before the girls were killed, with their doors unlocked. They let their children go out on the trail unattended. And after that, it just never was the same. When we would visit here for the year anniversary and the 2-year anniversary and all of the anniversaries that have passed since, parents told us that they never felt safe again. So people really hoping to learn what it is about this arrest today. Indiana State Police have to say to perhaps get some closure. Of course, for these families, there's never really any closure they're without. Two people they loved very much. I've talked to the families several times over the years.
And I know that we've talked about just how much this obviously
saying today is.
Yeah, and it looks like, Emily, I know that we're having some microphone issues with you, but it does look like someone has just approached the podium. So I don't know if maybe you can tell us if they're starting the press conference or not. Okay, so it sounds like they are giving us a 2-minute warning. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, that's okay. But yeah, again, about 2 minutes or so. They are expecting to start this promptly at 10. But I was mentioning that I was going to ask Emily. We've talked about just how much this obviously rocked the Delphi community, but it is evident just in seeing the amount of people that are in the room for this press conference, just how much of a widespread effect that this had. So many people asking for answers. I know that we've talked to the family numerous amount of times as we asked for updates during this case, but still waiting to see. They've told us they would not be speaking ahead of this press conference before this information came out, but just if they will be willing to speak with us today.
We did hear from some of them via their own social media accounts. One of the grandmothers, for instance, said that today is the day. You know, that's one of the quotes that we received from one of the grandmothers, saying today is the day. It's a day that we will eventually come face to face with the monster responsible for this. We're giving you continuous live pictures here so you can see the audience. As Emily mentioned, a lot of people in the community have actually come out for this press conference, which certainly isn't standard in any case, but for the 5.5 years that they've all been following this case and hoping for answers, you got to imagine that they want to be here. We are hoping that we will be able to talk to Abby and Libby's family members and hopefully hear some kind of relief after this. I think we've got Emily again. We're just seconds away, I know, from this press conference beginning. Emily?
Yeah, we're probably about a minute now. Indiana State Police just got up and said we were about to give us the 2-minute warning about a minute ago. Apologize for those mic issues, but members of the community are here, have not seen the family as yet, trying to look around. They're supposed to be seated on the other side of the room, but yeah, the community, these families, I mean, this is the day, today is the day that they have been waiting for more than 5 years. As I was saying before, the girls' murders really changed this entire community. Here's Indiana State Police right now.
Good morning. My name is Sergeant Jeremy Pierce, Public Information Officer for the Indiana State Police Lafayette Post. I'd like to thank you all for being here and thank the Delphi United Methodist Church for allowing us to use their facility. This morning we're going to provide an update on the investigation into the murders of Abigail Williams and Liberty German. Before we get started, I'm going to introduce to you our speakers, Superintendent of the Indiana State Police, Doug Carter, the Carroll County Sheriff, Tobe Lesenby, and the Carroll County Prosecutor, Nick McClelland. I'd like to remind everyone that this continues to be an active and ongoing investigation. At the conclusion of this press conference, we are going to answer a limited amount of questions out of respect to the investigation and the process that will follow today. We will not discuss evidence that is related to this investigation. On behalf of the Delphi Double Homicide Task Force, thank you all for your continued support. I would now like to introduce to you our first speaker, Superintendent of the Indiana State Police, Doug Carter.
Give me just a second here. Seldom do I have prepared remarks, but today is different because I do not want there to be any confusion or ambiguity with what I will say. Today is not a day to celebrate, but the arrest of Richard M. Allen of Delphi on 2 counts of murder is sure a major step in leading to the conclusion of this long-term and complex investigation. First, I'd like to speak directly to Anna, Mike, Becky, Kelsey, your extended families, along with the entire Delphi community that certainly has grown and now includes our nation and even many countries around the world. I am proud to report to you that today, actually last Friday, was the day, and an arrest has been made. Thanks to literally hundreds of media outlets that have been steadfast in reporting and keeping the memories of Abby and Libby front and center. Many of you in the room have developed relationships with me personally, and you know I always have a personal perspective, and today's no different. But from a very personal perspective, you all have provided inspiration and support even while oftentimes frustrated with us and me. You continue to encourage the efforts, and you too believe that one day we would all be here participating and sharing this news. To the entire law enforcement community, which includes all local, state, and federal agencies, which are far too many to specifically mention today, thank you, thank you, thank you. We are going to continue a very methodical and committed approach to ensure that if any other person had any involvement in these murders in any way, that person or persons will be held accountable. Since the murders of Abby and Libby 2,086 days ago, the daily investigative team has worked tirelessly and is certainly worthy of mention today. Specifically, Sheriff Linsonby, the Sheriff of Carroll County, Detectives Tony Liggett, Detective retired Kevin Hammond, former Delphi Chief and now the prosecutor's investigator Steve Mullins, State Police First Sergeant Jerry Holman, Detectives Jay Harper, Dave Vito, and Brian Harshman, along with members of the United States Marshal Service, specifically Agent Jeremy Clinton and Agent Bill Culfers. With them today is Dan McClain, the U.S. Marshal, appointed U.S. Marshal. Our state police analyst, our scientist from many different disciplines within our laboratory division, Mrs. Kathy Shank, for your incredible dedication to detail and to so many others that I know I've missed. I really believe that Abby and Libby would be proud of you for standing strong, even in the face of immense pressure and perpetual criticism. Some of these individuals have postponed retirement, passed on promotional opportunity, have dedicated personal time away from their families, given up nights, weekends, and holidays, all while in the pursuit of accountability for Abby and Libby. I know that today's announcement will not diminish your resolve, and I hope you have found just a bit of peace in this most complicated world. This is really important. While I know you are all expecting final details today concerning this arrest, today is not that day. Today is not that day. This investigation is far from complete, and we will not jeopardize its integrity by releasing or discussing documents or information before the appropriate time. Prosecutor Nick McClellan, of course, will share additional information about what we can and cannot say, and also explain to you why the probable cause affidavit is temporarily sealed by the court and not available. And by the way, he has been a tremendous asset to this team. I'm yet again asking you for your patience and please your understanding while our system of due process works. Also remember that all persons arrested are presumed innocent. All persons arrested are presumed innocent. You all will have an innate desire to subjectively interpret and then report what you think. We in the law enforcement realm cannot, and you should never allow us to, talk about what we think concerning facts, but rather discuss and share at the right time what it is we know. The time will come when additional details can be released. But again, today is not that day. It's about Abby and Libby, their families, and this community, this nation, and even our planet. The prosecutor has been very clear with law enforcement about what his expectations are, about what can and cannot be released, shared, or discussed. So we will, of course, comply. If you choose to be critical of our silence, be critical of me, not the front line. These are the folks that have committed their entire lives to a successful conclusion. In other words, a guilty verdict. As we move to the next phase of this investigation, I will continue to offer all resources that the ISP has to not only the investigative team that I anticipate growing, but also to Prosecutor McClellan as we prepare for the coming months. Again, Nick has been very resolute and very clear, and I'm most grateful for his leadership. And it's going to be really important as we move forward. Please continue offering tips that you would like to share. The many avenues to report will remain open and will be available to all. Please continue doing that. In closing, I stand before you in this church and very place where we held our first briefing nearly 6 years ago, and just hours after the murders of Abby and Libby. Right here. Pulling in today, I wasn't really sure what emotion I would experience. But peace came over me. And I didn't expect that to happen. And I hope all of you, with all the different responsibilities you have from around the planet today, have felt some of that as well. But remember, we're not done. I think what we all have experienced proves that together there's nothing we cannot do. But more importantly, giving of ourselves, all of us, giving of ourselves matters more than what we could ever receive. Abby and Libby, though in death, have had a profound effect on so many of us, on how we live, and as importantly, who we all should be. I would now like to introduce to you my friend and the Carroll County Sheriff, Tom Ledzaby, for his remarks. Sheriff.
I believe in a God of justice and righteousness. Today, I believe that same God has provided us with justice for Abby and Libby. As Sheriff of Carroll County, Indiana, I want to publicly and sincerely thank each individual who played a role in helping us during this 5.5-year investigation. Whether it was in an investigative capacity, providing tips, cards or letters of suggestions or encouragement, phone calls, and thousands of other countless ways of communicating. I earnestly thank those who prayed for this moment in time. We now move forward through the Indiana criminal justice system, allowing the system to provide its due diligence and process in providing that justice which is owed Abby and Libby, their families, and this community. Thank you.
Welcome, everybody. My name is Nicholas McClellan. I'm the Carroll County Prosecutor. And before we get started, I want to reiterate some of the things that Sheriff Lesenby and Superintendent Carter stated. I first want to thank both of them. They've been a great support to my office throughout this investigation. They've always been there for a phone call and always been willing to help a hand or a line of assistance to me and my office during this investigation. I want to thank the team behind me. This is the Homicide Task Force team that we've put together. Thank them and thank their families for being so understanding for the many nights they've worked away from their families, away from their children. There are many dates in a lifetime that you're going to remember. The date your children are born, the date you're married, the date you buy a first house, the date Abby and Libby went missing. One of those dates was last Friday, October 28, 2022. At that time, we had gathered evidence to formulate a PC that we submitted to the court, and the judge did find probable cause for an arrest of Richard Allen. He's been charged with 2 counts of murder for the murder of Abigail Williams and Liberty German. This investigation is still very ongoing. We're keeping the tip line open, the tip email open. We encourage everybody to continue to call in tips, not only about Richard Allen, but about any other person that you may have. For that reason and for the nature of this case, the probable cause and the charging information has been sealed by the court. I've been very clear to everybody that per the court order, we cannot talk about the evidence that's in the probable cause or the evidence that's in the charging information. That will become evident to you at some point and it will be released, but right now is not that day. Today's about Abby and Libby, focusing on them. Mr. Allen has had his initial hearing. He's entered a preliminary plea of not guilty. The matter's been set for a pretrial on January 13th at 9 a.m., 2023, and a trial date of March 20th, 2023 at 9 a.m. He is presumed innocent. We will have an opportunity and day in court when we can present the evidence that we have against him. But until that day, he is presumed innocent. I want to open it up to a few limited questions from the audience. But again, keep in mind, we are not going to talk about the evidence that we have in this case or about the charging information. We cannot. Those things have been sealed by the court. And so I want to open up a few questions.
Prosecutor, when did Richard Allen become a suspect, and do you think he acted alone?
Again, that's part of the investigation, so I'm not going to talk about those things. What I can say is that we have probable cause established by the court for his arrest, and he is in custody. He's being held currently without bond.
How long has he been a suspect?
I'm sorry? Again, that gets into the evidence we have of the investigation, and I know from everybody it's frustrating. I know everybody, not only reporters, but the family, everybody wants to know more information. I understand it's frustrating, but my goal is to maintain the integrity of this case.
Superintendent Carter, you had said that you believe that you had spoken to the suspect or the suspect's family 2 years ago. Is this man one of those people?
Again, I appreciate the question, but we're getting into the timeline of events, and today's not the time to do that.
Can you talk about how rare it is?
Family, I know you've had a lot of conversations with them. You were almost in tears pretty much when you started off this press conference. Can't imagine how emotional it is for everybody that's worked on this case. What was your conversation first like with the family of Abby and Libby when you were able to tell them you finally got the suspect?
It was a very personal moment for me, and I think it was a very personal moment for them, for all of us that have had interaction with the family. We developed a relationship that I think is going to last at least one lifetime, and maybe a second. So it was a very, very, very sad yet a very humbling experience.
Superintendent, you asked for tips. Detective work was a reward for $325,000. Did this all come together to make this nexus? Is that the combination of all three things that led us to this day, or is it one or the other?
Well, eventually you'll be able to see what led us to this day, but again, today's not that day. To include the reward, you mentioned that, Raphael, about the reward itself, and again, very premature for us to talk about that. There's still a tremendous amount of work to do.
So you're going to say that Abby and Libby have taught you in depth that we can remain to continue on with it.
I think probably resilience and understanding the value of each and every day. That today was the day, but I didn't anticipate they ever thought today would be their day. And I feel like I've known him for a long time. Excuse me?
Do you assume there's any other individuals involved in this case?
We haven't closed the door on the investigation. And so that's why we keep the tip line and the tip email open. And so we're not presuming anything at this point, but we're going to continue to take tips, continue to take any information anybody has. And as we've done with all the information we've gathered, we're going to look at that and examine that and see where it leads us.
Mr. Prosecutor, can you explain the law? You've asked the court, based on this investigation, that these documents should remain out of the public view. Can you explain, without getting into the details of what's in the documents, but this is not regular. Usually a public hearing is held. We should be able to see all the documents, right?
Sure,
But
sure.
you made a decision. Can you explain your decision as to why you believe that maybe for the next 30 days, no one in this room should have access to those records?
Sure. It is unusual. We don't do it very often in all the cases that we handle here in Carroll County. We did it in this case because the investigation is still open. And while all cases are important, the nature of this case has some extra scrutiny with it. And so my office, felt it was important to seal those records. There will be a public hearing on whether or not those records are going to remain sealed or not. There'll be public notice for that hearing so that everyone can attend, but there will be a hearing to determine whether or not they're going to stay sealed. But for now, to me, it's about protecting the integrity of this case. I want to have an opportunity at some point to have an opportunity in court to explain the evidence and for that not to be tarnished or tainted or anything like that. Again, he's presumed innocent, and so it was important for me in this case to do that. Hold on just a minute. We're not going to comment on that right now as part of the investigation. Again, we just encourage everybody to continue to call in tips if they have them about anybody, and we'll examine those tips.
How does it feel for you guys to have searched nationwide for nearly 6 years, going all over the place, only to find your guy, down the street from your office?
That's a hard question to answer. It's a mixed emotions. I've been watching the news all weekend like everybody else has, and I think a lot of the members of the public said it right. It's bittersweet. It's a step in the right direction. It's concerning that he's a local guy. So I think just different emotions. Again, this is a step in the right direction. This is the first step into getting into court and having a trial. And so.
Has Mr. Allen been cooperative?
All right. That concludes our press conference today. Shortly, I will be releasing a press release that will have his photo and a couple more details that'll also be here for handout. That'll also be on the Indiana State Police Lafayette Post Facebook page. Right after this press conference, I'm going to send it out. There's also hard documents in the back. Thank you all for taking the time to be here today, and be safe as you travel home.
State Police wrapping up the press conference on the Delphi investigation and the very latest. What we can tell you, if you missed us at the top of the broadcast, there has been an arrest made in connection to the case. Richard M. Allen, he is now charged with 2 counts of murder. We understand the probable cause in this case is sealed. So very frustrating, of course, for the media trying to get answers. But as we heard, Doug Carter there, the superintendent with the state police, and of course the county prosecutor, Nick McClelland, that is sealed, those documents sealed for a reason. So there must be things that they need to keep close to the vest during the rest of the investigation.
He actually started off speaking, I'd say, very emotional, which, I mean, you can imagine being so close to this case. He mentioned 2,086 days of investigation and all of the follow-ups that we've done. We heard from Indiana State Police Superintendent, again, Doug Carter, Carroll County Sheriff, also the prosecutor, all of them with an overlapping message that, again, today is the day that we can tell you that an arrest has been made, but for a lot of these details that so many of us, that all of us still have, today is not that day. And it's because this investigation is ongoing, because of all of the questions that will still need to be answered in trial. You mentioned that he said the probable cause is temporarily sealed, but he said that they're still accepting tips in this case. And while, still it will be likely be a while before that March trial, before a lot of these details are starting to be released, but still saying that they're looking to prosecute or go after anyone else who also may be involved in this. So that tip line, that email line is still open as well.
Interesting that Doug Carter with the state police, who has been on this case from the very beginning, as he noted, standing in the same place where he first announced the murders of the 2 young girls, that he said this is not a day to celebrate, and it certainly doesn't feel like it. You know, obviously it's been a very hard investigation. Emily is on the scene there at that press conference as it wraps up, and Emily, I know you've been there from the very beginning, and we just aren't going to be able to get those details that we all so desperately need.
Yeah, and the prosecutor saying just a few minutes ago, look, it's not typical to seal those court documents, but in this situation, in this case, they are sealing them to maintain the integrity of the investigation. Indiana State Police Superintendent Doug Carter saying today is not the day to give those details, that this day is about Abby and Libby and their families, and saying that he hopes the girls would be proud of the work that investigators have done in this case. He talked about the team of investigators that have worked this more than 5.5-year-long case. Some of them, he said, foregoing retirement, foregoing promotions just to stay on this and to try and bring justice to Abby and Libby. Of course, we are learning, again, they announced Richard Allen charged with 2 counts of murder, saying that last Friday was the day. That is a refrain that the families have repeated for more than 5 years. Today is the day. Superintendent Doug Carter saying last Friday was that day. And again, we did hear they are keeping that investigative tip line open to receive any more tips that may come in about Mr. Allen, to receive any tips that may come in with anyone else, saying that they would, you know, if there were other people involved, they would also be looking to bring them to justice, saying that Mr. Allen has had his preliminary hearing and pleaded not guilty. But again, there were not a lot of details as to why they charged Richard Allen, why he is behind bars, and investigators saying again that they wanted to preserve the integrity of the case. You know, I've interviewed Doug Carter several times over the past 5 years, and he has said many times that he took this personally, that he took solving this case personally. And the last time I interviewed him was at the 5-year anniversary, and he said, look, when an arrest does come, that is when the real work will begin. We'll have to start back at square one and go over everything all again. So you could hear him indicate that today, that they were about to ramp things up. Investigators have always said these past 5 years that this case was not cold, even though the number of investigators on it decreased. In the very beginning, there were hundreds of law enforcement here, local, state, federal, and many of them thought that this case would be solved within just a couple of weeks. Obviously, that didn't happen. Here we are 5.5 years later, but investigators happy to announce that Friday was the day, and Richard Allen is charged in these girls' murders. Ladies?
I know that we've not shared any photos of Richard Allen, at least on our news outlets, but some of the Facebook posts that we've seen from family members saying that now, as you mentioned, police are saying this is when the real work begins, but they're saying that now there is some sense of relief, but it's bittersweet because now they're able to put a face to what they call a monster in this case. But what can you tell me about the last time you spoke with family members and what they were feeling about this press conference happening today?
You know, I texted with family members over the weekend to ask them if they had any comment, and over the weekend they did not. You know, they thanked me for being in touch and understood that we were reaching out to them, but they didn't want to comment until they heard what state police, what investigators had to say at today's press conference. Of course, we will be reaching out to them now to get some thoughts from them, but over the weekend they were pretty tight-lipped. We did talk to them at the 5-year anniversary. And, you know, one thing that stuck with me, well, a few things. Kelsey German, Libby's sister, saying that she hears her sisters laugh every morning. And she was the last person to see the girls alive. She's the one that dropped them off at the trail to go hiking that day. Another thing that stuck with me is Mike Patty, Libby's grandfather, talking about how he thinks about all of the plans that he had with his granddaughter to teach her to drive, to watch her graduate high school, how how that would not happen. Anna Williams, Abby was her only child. Anna repeatedly told me on a few occasions that she thought, in her own opinion, that the suspect was probably someone local, although she couldn't be sure. No one could be sure. But Mike Patty, Libby's grandfather, always saying, you know, there is a killer still out there, and he knows where Delphi is. He always said that. So the family was always grateful to talk, to have the opportunity to talk, because they wanted to make sure that people were not forgetting these two girls. And as you heard Doug Carter say, this community of Delphi, the nation, even the world, has not forgotten and took an interest in this case. There really was a global interest in this case of these two young girls, and we heard that again today.
Noting that the Today Show was covering this story and this possible break in the case today. You know, I know that you have talked to a lot of community members there, and you started off by saying that it just really has never been the same, a small community. You know, noting, of course, that the person that they have under arrest is presumed innocent until found guilty, which Doug Carter was very, made sure he mentioned over and over again. But to find out that a man in that very small community is the one that has been arrested and is charged in the girls' murders, I just can't imagine what those community members are going to be feeling now, Emily.
Yeah, it's really breathtaking when you think about it. I think about all of the times when I have been in Delphi and talked to parents, and how they said it just changed how they felt about letting their kids out alone. I think about the first day being here and talking to the school superintendent, and how the concern was there from parents, you know, that they had to go to work that day, and they were concerned for their children's safety, and were things going to be safe at school. I think about the teenagers that I've talked to over the years who went to school with Abby and Libby, who were in 8th grade with the girls, who knew the girls, and now they're grown up now. Now they've graduated from high school, and some of them are still here, and they say, you know, things changed for us as teenagers after that. Our lives were not as carefree as they used to be, and people always wondering, was it somebody right down the street? I remember talking to, you know, family members, Abby and Libby's family members, and saying, you know, when they're in the grocery store, when they're, you know, at the post office, looking at the faces of every man that walked by, wondering, is that the man from the sketch? Is that the man from the bridge? So, yeah, it really, it changed everything about this small town.
Well, in case some of our viewers were not at the top of the hour with us, we do have some sound from Superintendent with the IPS, Doug Carter, talking about this case here just a few minutes ago. And also, you know, it is really, it doesn't go unnoticed, Emily, how emotional he is and will probably continue to be about this case. Let's take a listen.
Today is not a day to celebrate, but the arrest of Richard M. Allen of Delphi on 2 counts of murder is sure a major step in leading to the conclusion of this long-term and complex investigation. First, I'd like to speak directly to Anna, Mike, Becky, Kelsey, your extended families, along with the entire Delphi community that certainly has grown and now includes our nation and even many countries around the world. I am proud to report to you that today, actually last Friday, was the day.
That is Superintendent Carter announcing the arrest, and we will mention it is Richard Allen. He is a resident of Delphi, Indiana, we know from police, and he is currently charged right now with 2 counts of murder. Of course, very little else information other that he is being held without bond, and a trial date has already been set for March 23rd.
And one thing we can tell you, I know, Emily, these are the questions that you've likely been asking all weekend long, as everyone else in the room too, is when did he become a suspect? How long has he been on the police radar? What were you told, in addition to what we learned in the press conference today, about when those questions can be answered?
Yeah, I mean, we know that the sources are telling us that the charging documents are going to be sealed for at least 30 days. So we're not getting any of those answers anytime soon. And you heard reporters shouting out those questions. How did you connect Mr. Allen to this? What was the break in the case? Is he connected to other folks? Do you think there's other folks involved? And you saw again and again and again, look, we are not going to discuss that. We do not want to do anything to jeopardize the integrity of that case. And I was just listening to Superintendent Carter there, that soundbite that you just played, and yeah, he was visibly emotional throughout this entire press conference, and he said outright, look, if you want to criticize anybody for how we've conducted this investigation or how tight-lipped we're being, criticize me. Don't criticize the people behind me, the people on the front lines of this investigation. Doug Carter has said over and over and over again that this investigation was personal for him, that he believed that that one day would be the day that they would solve this case. Many times at many press conferences, as they were giving sketches and pictures and audio over the years, he would directly look into the camera and address the killer out there and say, we know you are out there. We know you want to know what we know, and one day you're going to know what we know. So I have to imagine for him to come to this moment, as he said, it's not a day to celebrate. This is about Abby and Libby and their families, but I have to imagine, as he said, he drove up here today and a sense of peace came over him. He wasn't expecting that feeling, but he said a sense of peace came over him. So, that was the emotion that he expressed here today to us.
And boy, you could just see it, Emily. I've known Doug Carter for about 25 years, and to see how he is handling this, you can tell it's something that has hit him very deep and very personal. I think maybe we should talk a little bit about why perhaps this has gained such national attention. Certainly so many unique aspects to this case. The girls disappeared on a Monday when they didn't have school. As you mentioned, her sister dropped them off on a beautiful February day, which would be unusual in Indiana anyway. And then when they still weren't accounted for by that afternoon or the next day, then it became concerning. But then when we learned that they had been found murdered, certainly shock and disbelief by everyone. But the fact that one of the girls, we can presume, had the forethought to record a little bit of that audio and perhaps have those pictures that were captured that would ultimately give police a little bit of information. I feel like that's probably one of the reasons this has garnered so much attention nationally. Don't you think so?
Absolutely. I mean, I was reading through some of my old notes last night from these past 5 years, and in an interview with Doug Carter, he said, I can't recall any other time when we've literally had video of the person we believe is responsible, audio, the voice of the person we believe is responsible. Mike Patty talking about that in the years that Libby had the foresight to record that. He always thought, he told me that he thought that she recorded it maybe to show him later, like, hey, Grandpa, look at this weird guy that was kind of walking towards us on the bridge. And he called his granddaughter a hero for doing that. He always talked about how smart Libby was. He talked about several times how much these girls loved each other. They were dear friends. And he would always say, I don't know exactly what happened that afternoon, but I have to imagine at one point or the other, one of the girls had an opportunity to run to try and get away, and they didn't. They stayed with each other. So that is something that he has always talked about. But yeah, this case, I mean, in those early days, again, even those early vigils, I remember people from Canada and other countries being here, and you only have to take a look online to see all of the people from all over the world that have written in or had something to say on social media. Some of them have called reporters, have called me. Yeah, definitely a case that grabbed worldwide attention, certainly.
And Emily, I know that we're going to let you go as you continue to wrap up some of these loose ends for us for later on 13 News for us a little bit later today. But as we transition, we do want to get a little bit from the prosecutor, because I know that we heard from a couple of officials, but the prosecutor, Nicholas McLaughlin, kind of giving some insight as to all those questions that we're looking to get answered, why it's difficult to answer those right now. So let's take a listen.
There are many dates in a lifetime that you're going to remember. The date your children are born, the date you're married, the date you buy a first house, the date Abby and Libby went missing. One of those dates was last Friday, October 28, 2022. At that time, we had gathered evidence to formulate a PC that we submitted to the court, and the judge did find probable cause for an arrest of Richard Allen. There are many dates in a lifetime that you're going to remember. The date your children are born, the date you're married, the date you buy a first house, the date Abby and Libby went missing. One of those dates was last Friday, October 28, 2022. At that time, we had gathered evidence to formulate a PC that we submitted to the court, and the judge did find probable cause for an arrest of Richard Allen. There are many dates in a lifetime that you're going to remember. The date your children are born, the date you're married, the date you buy a first house, the date Abby and Libby went missing. One of those dates was last Friday, October 28, 2022. At that time, we had gathered evidence to formulate a PC that we submitted to the court, and the judge did find probable cause for an arrest of Richard Allen.
And we now have a very first look at the mugshot taken presumably on Friday when Richard M. Allen was arrested. He is now charged with 2 counts of murder, and he is being held without bail. Of course, as we mentioned, we are getting very limited information from police as they continue this investigation. We know the court documents are sealed. However, a judge looked at the evidence in this case and ruled there was enough evidence to make that arrest, and that happened on Friday.
And I know over the weekend, as this news broke, a lot of people, you may have likely seen photographs of Richard Allen, but as we mentioned, this is our first look that we are actually seeing of a mugshot, because we have to wait until he's actually been arrested or hearing police that official confirmation that he has been arrested and linked to this case as well. I know that was a question that we had this morning. We're asking that we've seen photographs that are circulating and how we were able to make that connection there. But again, if you're just joining us this afternoon, letting you know that this mugshot that you're seeing is Richard Allen now facing 2 counts of murder in connection to Abby and Libby German.
Obviously, we know it's frustrating. There are still so many answers. We've not been given any indication of his direct connection. As we mentioned, these papers will be sealed at least for the next 30 days. Not just, frustrating for the public, of course, and the media who have really wanted this case solved. We've talked about this is day 2086 in this investigation for state police and Carroll County Police and the FBI. We also heard that officers working this case have wanted to stay on the case, taking days away from their family just so they could make this day a reality.
And as you mentioned, as frustrating as it is for us to have these questions and want these answers, you can imagine how frustrating it is that these are details the family does not even know after all of this time. So again, when those details are able to be released, but maybe likely not until the trial, because again, those details are sealed. We are working to maybe possibly hear from family a little later today. They said that they would be willing to speak, but they have been clear that they would not be speaking until these new details came out later today, obviously in the room. And we have reporters that have been working to see if they are willing to speak and willing to share how they feel about this arrest that's now been solidified today.
You know, interesting, so interesting to hear Superintendent of the Indiana State Police, Doug Carter, say that this isn't a day to celebrate because it certainly doesn't feel that way, even though this is something that nearly 6 years later, family members, the community there have been waiting for someone to be arrested. And a post by one of the relatives put it very poignantly, saying that this is the monster that we finally can put a face to. So we will continue to cover this story, of course, from Delphi, Indiana. Be joining us today at noon for the very latest. We do hope we'll have heard from some family members by then and how they're feeling.
We'll see you then.